Hello, everyone. So usually I would have something to show you ahead of to show you what we're going to be building, but I don't have anything to show you. And what that means is that you're also going to see me having to go and read the documentation, which I think is important. So one of the key things about APIs and just development in general is getting good at reading documentation. Often we don't know the answer ourselves, so we have to go look and see at the documentation, and every API is going to work differently and have different endpoints and have different data. So it's quite important to be able to read your documentation. There's a question about whether we're going to be using frameworks in this, and no, this is just going to be a vanilla JavaScript tutorial on making GET requests to an API. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use this open library search API. And what we're going to do is we'll have a user be able to input some text here. They'll hit search, and it will then go and query this API and return results for what the user has input in the search field there. At the moment, I just have the simple HTML file here. And then an empty script file and a style sheet that just adds a font. So it's pretty simple at the moment what we're going to be doing here. Okay, let's get started on writing some code. I'll try to zoom in one more. It's quite hard to develop when it's so small, but let's give it a shot. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is I want to set up an async function. I'll call it get data. And inside, and I'll call this function as well. Inside of this function, I'm going to create a variable called response. And I will use fetch method to go and target. I'm just going to grab one of these. So there's let's go with that title. I can go and fetch this URL there. And I'll create another variable called results. And I'll say, this should also use the await keyword. And I'll say response.json. And then we can log that to the console, console.log results. Let me open my console here. And let's run that. And there we get back what I can tell, because I'm using Firefox. I can see that it's an object that has come back to me. It's quite important to know what type of variable you're working with. Different APIs will have different formats. So if you just look here, so imagine this, right? So this data, I as the developer could choose lots of ways of setting this up, right? I could have a property called results, and inside of that there's an array, and inside that is an object. Main, right? So I could set it up like that, where the base of the data is an object, and then I have a results property inside of that object. You could also have it differently. You could just have it as an array coming back. So then it's, like, no, I just have main. Right. So you have to see what you're working with. And also, just in terms of like this, I'm just choosing randomly to call it results. I could call it data, or I could call it books. So you need to look at the API and see what's coming back to you. So we can do that now. Let's go take a look here. So in the console, I'm just waiting for it to load now. I can see that I have an object. It has, I can see where the array is. So there's an array inside of this docs property here. And so we can access that. We could say results.docs. And there we can see now we're working with our array. And in this case, I want to have my array. And what I can do is I'll set up a second function here. I'll say add books. And the function, and it'll take in a list of books. So say list like that, or I could just call it books as well. Depends on what I'm thinking. And I need to get something inside of here. So there's a div with class of search results, and I'm going to add it to that element. So I'll go here, and I'm going to so const so search results, right to the camel case, and we'll look in the documents for this search results. Okay, and we'll now say that books dot for each book following, and this is console.log book for now. I need to call this add books function. Add books, and say result.docs. Okay. And now it's gone and console logged each. You can see now that there's a log. You can see there's a timestamp for each thing that has been logged here. And you can see the different items in that array being logged to the console here. Now, instead of logging into the console, I actually want to show it to the user. So I'm going to say search results dot inner HTML plus equals. I want plus equals because I wanted to add each item. And now I need to look in this object, and I need to see the is it bigger. So if you go look in, doesn't matter really which one, but I can see that there is a title. So I think that makes sense to have the title, and I can have maybe the subtitle. So I could have like, and maybe have the author. Where is the author? Author name. Okay. And you can see that author name comes to us as an array. It says there, array. So that's helpful. So what I can do then, so I think I'll go here and I'll say div class of book, and say h2 should be book dot title, and let's have the author paragraph span here, and we can say double check the name again. It's author underscore name, so it's book dot author underscore name. And I'll close the span. That's paragraph. And actually, so I can just throw that array onto the page, but it would be probably nicer if I handle the fact that there's these author names and the fact that they could be an array or they are an array. So what I could do, I could say the first person. So for example, that's just list now the first person. I could say write something like that. Okay, I don't think we need to worry too much about getting all of the authors right, but more important is the API calls themselves. Are there any questions at this point in terms of what's going on? I mean, is it better if I don't know what's better. Is there any questions? Please drop them in the chat if they are. If you're writing the question, then go ahead. I think what I'll do next is I'm going to create a link for the user to be able to click to be able to view data for that specific book. So I need to go here. And here's the specific book. And it says that the way okay, so here, work pages. So this is an example, Fantastic Mr. Fox. Okay, so this is an example of an endpoint for Fantastic Mr. Fox. We then need to get this code here out of our API. So let's go have a look and see where that code is. All right, so there's an author key or a cover edition key. What do they want? If we remove the title from the URL and then suffix JSON, see now I'm just having to read and figure out how they want this. Okay, so if we wanted one of these, oh, there we are. It actually just says key. That is quite useful. Thanks. Okay, so you can see here, there's this key. So that's what I need to get, and I need to add as my link. So I'll say href, and I need to create a file now. So I'm going to go ahead and create a file here. Let's call it book.html. And I'll change this to book.js, and I'll create that file. And now I'm going to link across to book.html, and I need to add a key. So I'm going to add this key. So key equals, and it is book.key. Book. Okay, so now I have a bunch of links, and you can see that they link across to this page. And if I go and click across here, you can see in the URL address bar, I've given myself some data, and I can now use that data to be able to make an API call on this page to be able to show the data for that endpoint there. All right, so the next thing that we need to do, sorry, there's a question. Will the code be available after, not for copy paste, but for guidance? And do you ever comment the code like one of the lessons told us to always do to make it more understandable for others? Yeah, I mean, I can be adding comments. I guess I'm trying to just fit it all in, but comments are useful to be able to understand kind of like what add books, because actually that's probably a bad function name, guys. If you think about it, because that could mean like the user wants to add books to the page, like add books to the library or something. So maybe I should change that name. This is all being done on the fly, so it is a little, it's not always going to be entirely perfect. So let me change that from add books to, let's call it create HTML. Yeah, so in terms of the comments, I add comments if I think it's going to be useful for myself or for another developer to be able to read and understand what I've done. Try to keep comments to only be when it's important and helpful. If there's lots of comments, it can actually be a little overwhelming sometimes, especially if the comments are too long. So personally, I keep my comments to when I think that they're important. So this is a question just about comments and whether you should be adding comments to the JavaScript. So do it when it makes sense for you and to be able to explain your thinking to someone else. But ideally, a lot of your code should be written in a way that is quite self-explanatory and obvious to another developer were they to go and read it. Okay, so now I'm going to go onto the books page, and what I want to do is I want to be able to get that data that I've added to the page. So let me go here. And what I'm going to do is I will say that I want the query string document.location.search, and then I'll say const params equals new URL search params, and that'll be the query string variable I've just created. And then I'll say const it's called works ID equals get key. Let me just console log that. It's working. What's important is that this page, this book.html here, that it actually has this key. Sometimes I find what happens with students is they are working on this page and then it says null and they can't understand why it's saying null. But the reason it's saying null is because it's not actually in the URL. But now I can see here in my console that there it is coming through. And so I can make an API call to that. And so I'll go ahead and do that. So let me just copy this. This is the URL that I need to send to. Let me just copy this. Yeah. Except now instead of going to fetch from this URL, that works one. Let me just, I lost it now, so let me copy it again. And so now it's going to go and fetch from that URL there. And let's just console log this. Console.log, and this was log results. I haven't called the function. Okay, so now I get back this here. As you can see, though, it's the fantastic Mr. Fox, because I haven't actually changed the end of this URL. Now I can keep writing this URL somewhere, but imagine that I was working with an API on my local computer, and I was going to one day move this API to the web, so that would be accessible for everyone. So when so I'm working on my API and I'm working it on my local computer. So that's a good way to like practice and build your code while you work. Then what you want to do is you want to have one place where the URL is set. Hopefully that made sense. JS. And I just need to get this URL. So I'm going to just grab this here, and I'm going to create, I'm going to export variable, and I'll call it URL. And if I go back here, I'm just going to change this. All right. Module. And I'm going to go back to the home page. And now instead of handwriting this URL, I'm going to import it. So I'll go up here and I'm going to say import. I see that there was a question, so I will answer that now. Let me just finish this. There is a URL, and it's from API. And I want to use that in my fetch here. So I'm only going to include that search. I'll say it's not liking that. Okay, let's leave out the imports then. So I'll just go back to that. But the point is that you can just you can create a variable which you can then use across the page. But for some reason, the it's not liking it for a cause reason. So let's avoid any cause errors. There's a question in the chat regarding the API key. When I uploaded the JS1 MA3, I got an email from GitHub that my key is public. How to use the API key in an open repo that can't be stolen? Can the API call be in a private repo and imported to the public one? So what you'll usually do is you'll have what's called a .env file. And the .env file is you use gitignore to keep it on your local computer. And so what you do is you'll have, it's basically just a file that stores the keys, but you keep it on your computer and no one else sees it because it never goes up to GitHub. And then that key, when you deploy your app, so you would deploy an app, say on something like Heroku, you then go to Heroku and you would tell them what your special keys are. And that way you can keep it safe so that it never goes out to the public. Because if you have a public API key, it could be used. So what people can do is then they'll take your key and then they will be able to get, say, a whole bunch of like API calls. And if you're saying on a paying subscription, you could get charged for all of those API calls that get made. So yeah, we get to .env files in due course. But yeah, so that's kind of the answer to that question. Okay, so we've got this here. And you can click to view that book. Now I need to make sure that this API call in books.js is actually to my URL. So what I'm going to do is I'll Move that, which I've hard coded in. And I'll say plus works ID. It's giving me a cause error. Just double check this. So if I go here, it's still giving me a cause error. Of cause. Cool. So that works. Unexpected character. Oh, okay, so this is because I've got a, as you can see here, I've got a / there, and the works already has a /. So that could be my problem there. I'm just now waiting for the API to come back. Okay, still a problem. Let's try that. If anyone can see what's going wrong, you're very welcome to comment. You know what it is? It's supposed to say .json. There we go. So let's go back. So let me now just make this a template literal. So you see how this API specifically wants to have a .json at the end of the URL. So you just have to look and see what the documentation is telling you. Here, clearly didn't read properly and didn't see that I clearly need to add that .json on the end. So that was why it was giving me problems. So let's go back to this. And now I get that item. Okay, but now let's just add that to the page. So I'll go here and I'm going to remove the search. And I'll call this book results. And go back here and we create a results. Say book container. Well, let me create a function for that. So go function HTML. Let me just, sorry, that's an object. And then we'll pass through these results. And here we'll call it a book. And we can add the book add book.title. I'll add that as an H1. one, and we can add a paragraph with the dot description. Okay, we can do so the characters. That's quite a fun one, I'd say. So let's go subject people. So we can do. So we can create a variable for this. So let's have characters HTML equals an empty string, or how about I have yeah, let's do this. Characters. And it will say book dot subject underscore people dot for each character, and we'll now add to this character list plus equals, let's make it an li, and we'll say it's just character. There's no objects. It's just close the li, and then we can add this to an unordered list. Then add that character list. Ooh. You can see, so sometimes this will happen in your code. Object, and that means I'm trying to add something which is which should be an object, which is an object. So I've obviously missed something here. So if I look at my console, so I get rid of, let me just add a log back in here. That console log. Okay. So here, I didn't notice that description was actually an object. Again, it's because I didn't look closely enough. And you can see here that it has properties. One of its properties is the type, and the other is the value. So I actually need to use the value. So I need to go here and I'll say book.description.value. And there I now get a description of I get the name of the book, I get the description, and I get the characters. Now I'm going to go back here. If there are any questions, to pop them in the chat. But what I want to do now is I want to go and get the search working. So I'm going to go and target that button. Let me just add a class to that button. Class of search. And button equals query selector. I'll just go here and I'm going to create, so that onClick should run the following function. And I'm just going to add in this event here, the event parameter, and I'll just console.log. Well, no, what I need to do is I need to select the input there, right? So I need to go ahead and select this input. I can only do it after the button's been clicked, because until the button gets clicked, there's no reason to select that. So what I can do is I'll go ahead and say const search input equals documents dot query selector. And I will document.query selector, and it is called, sorry, I just lost my train of thought there slightly. It is called search. Cool. And we can log that to the console. Save that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead here. Okay, let me just get rid of these logs for now. And let's just test here. See, I'm getting this error. So I need to just double check about the book.author name. So it seems like at some point one of them doesn't have an author name. So I'll probably just need to have a check then to make sure that if book author name actually exists. So it's not selecting that element. Why is it not? Because I haven't formatted that correctly. It's supposed to have a dot in front of it. If I now go here and I click search, I can now see that it selected that input. And importantly, if I go and look at the value, let me zoom in, you can see that there is a string of hello, which I've put in. Okay. So we know that we can access now this dot value property. So we'll say dot value. Actually need the event there. Now you can see if I search for hello, I get the word hello. Let's think Jungle Book, search Jungle Book. Okay, so now we have some words that we can search with. I just want to get rid of this issue about this book.author name here. So let's fix that first. So what we can do is we can create a variable for that. So author name equals author. Then we say if author name, so if book author name is truthy, then change the name of author name to that, and then we'll just add author name instead to the page. So what we're doing here is we're creating a default value for the author name, which is unknown author, and then if book.author name is actually set, then go ahead and change author name to now equal the real name of the first author of that book. Okay, so save on that, and we've got rid of our error. Now if we go ahead and search there, that comes through. Okay, let's take a look now. So now I've got the search input, and what I need to do is I need to go ahead and add a parameter to this function called search term. Or how about we just use term? And so now instead of calling this function just automatically, maybe search term still actually. We can pass in the search input. Now instead, at the end here, instead of now having it search for this title hand coded, we can add on search term. So let's see how that works. So if I go ahead and click Jungle Book, I then get a list of Jungle Books. I can go ahead and view the book, get undefined on that page. So does the Jungle Book not have a description? So let me double check here what's happening. Console log book, so that's been logged to the console. So in this case, description is, oh, this is frustrating. So in this case, description is a string. So remember where I had that issue before where I'd written book.description. So now I need to check and see whether description is an object or a string. So what we could do there, so we say if book with type of book dot description is equal to string. So let's create book description equals empty string. Okay, let's first say if it's an array. If it's an array, then make book description equal that. Else make book description just equal to hope everyone's following that. So I just had an issue there because it's sometimes an array and it's sometimes a string. So we can't control how the developer decided to make these things happen. And now I need to add book description into this variable here. It's a bit frustrating that you have coming back differently. All right, but there, that now works. We search Jungle Book again. And now book.subject underscore people is undefined. Okay, so again, we need to make a, need to check if that's truthy or not. So again, we do the same thing as we did before. So let's so we have this character list. So we just do a for loop here. And we'll just say if book dot book dot subject underscore people dot length is greater than 0, then go ahead and add that. Are there any questions on that? I can test with another. You can see how in testing I have to keep fixing things because the API isn't perfect and doesn't always have the data that I expect it to have. So I keep having to go back and fix things. But that's part of the process. It's just figuring out where you're missing something. All right, any questions? Hopefully I've kind of shown a bit of the need for reading the API documentation properly, which I didn't really do. I'm missing like that, for example, as well as just debugging and figuring out why something isn't working like you want it to. Please let me know if there's questions. Happy to talk about other things as well if you want to. Cool. Well, if there's no questions, then that's good. There's a question. Cool. So the API is deployed on a server. And so a server just serves up information onto the web. And then an API will live on that server. And you can have multiple APIs on a server. But yeah, so you're talking to the API, you're talking to the API that exists on that server, a bit like how you talk to the client talks to the web, like calls a server for a file that's on that server. So if you upload your HTML file to a server, what happens there is the client makes a request to the server to fetch a specific piece of information, and the specific information is kept in the URI, and then the server then sends that information back and says, oh, here's that file. But that file lives on the server. And in the same way, the API will live on that server. And I hope that makes sense. The question, yeah, I hope I explained that well enough. Okay, cool. Is there any other questions? Are there some public cause addresses? Yeah, so we have one for Noroff. So if you do run into a cause error, let's get it here.